The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal gardens of New Geneva. Children played between the floating water spheres while their parents tended to the exotic flowers that bloomed in impossible colors. The air smelled of vanilla and fresh rain, even though it had not rained in weeks. This was how humans lived now in the year 50-24. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked slowly through the garden paths, her aging hands clasped behind her back. At 93, she had seen more changes than most humans could imagine. She remembered when these very gardens were military training grounds. Now they were home to the most beautiful botanical collection in 3 star systems. Her assistant, a young man named David Park, caught up with her carrying a data pad. His face showed worry, but he tried to hide it. Sarah had taught him well over the years. "Ambassador, we have received another message from the Hegemony Dominion," David said quietly. "They are asking about our archaeological findings on Kepler 442c again." Sarah stopped walking and looked up at the artificial sky above the dome city. Through the transparent aluminum, she could see the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the peaceful borders of human space, other species were watching them, always watching. "What do they want to know this time?" she asked. "The same things. Details about the Forerunner artifacts we discovered. Technical specifications. Cultural significance. They seem very interested in the energy readings we reported." Sarah smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile someone makes when they remember something they wish they could forget. "Of course they are interested," she said. "The Forerunners were the most advanced species the galaxy has ever known. Their technology could change everything." David nodded. He had studied the Forerunners in university, like all human children did. They were the mysterious race that had built wonders across the galaxy millions of years ago, then vanished without explanation. Their artifacts were rare and powerful. Finding a cache of their technology was like discovering buried treasure. "Should we share our findings with them?" David asked. "The Hegemony has always been demanding in their requests." Sarah started walking again, but slower this time. Around them, the gardens hummed with quiet activity. Maintenance drones floated silently between the plants, tending to them with gentle mechanical arms. Families walked the paths, laughing and talking in soft voices. Everything was peaceful. Everything was calm. "Tell me, David, what do you know about the Hegemony Dominion?" David thought for a moment. "They are a military alliance of 12 different alien species. They control about 40% of known galactic space. They have the largest fleet in the galaxy and are known for their aggressive expansion policies. And what do they think of us? They consider humans to be a peaceful species, non-threatening. We have had minimal contact with them over the past century, mostly just trade agreements and cultural exchanges." Sarah stopped at a bench made of living wood that had grown into the perfect shape for sitting. She sat down slowly, her joints creaking with age. David sat beside her. "David, how long have humans been at peace?" 3,000 years, Ambassador. Since the founding of the Terran Peaceful Coalition in 2024. "And in all that time, have we ever fought a war?" "No, ma'am. Not a single military conflict. We are known throughout the galaxy as the Silent Gardeners because we prefer to build rather than destroy." Sarah looked at her hands. They were wrinkled and spotted with age, but steady. She had used these hands to sign peace treaties, to plant gardens, to comfort crying children. She had also used them for other things long ago. "The Hegemony sees us as weak," she said quietly. "They think that because we choose peace, we are unable to defend ourselves. They look at our unarmed ships and our unfortified colonies and they see opportunity." David frowned. "But we are peaceful. We chose this path because it is better than the alternative." "Yes, we chose it. But choosing something and being forced into it are very different things." Above them, a transport ship glided silently across the sky. It was sleek and white, with graceful curves and no visible weapons. Like all human vessels, it looked more like a work of art than a machine of war. The ship was heading toward the orbital station where Sarah worked, carrying diplomats and scientists from across human space. "Ambassador, do you think the Hegemony will try to take the Forerunner artifacts by force?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. In the distance, she could hear children laughing as they played in the anti-gravity pools. The sound made her heart ache with memories of a different time. "David, let me tell you something that is not in the history books you studied. 3,000 years ago, when humans first reached the stars, we were not peaceful. We were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever seen." David looked surprised. But the records show that the coalition was founded based on principles of non-violence and cooperation. The records show what we wanted them to show. The truth is more complicated. Sarah stood up slowly and started walking toward the exit of the gardens. We founded the coalition because we were afraid of ourselves, because we had become something terrible. They walked in silence for several minutes, passing through the beautiful spaces that humans had built across hundreds of worlds. Everything was designed to promote peace and harmony. Soft curves instead of sharp angles, natural materials instead of industrial metals, colors that calmed the mind instead of exciting it. What were we afraid of? David finally asked. Sarah stopped at the entrance to the government building where she worked. It was a tall spire made of grown crystal, spiraling up into the artificial sky like a frozen tornado. Inside, diplomats from across human space worked to maintain the peaceful relationships that had kept their species safe for 3 millennia. We were afraid that if we continued on the path we were walking, there would be nothing left in the galaxy but ash and empty space. She placed her hand on the security scanner, and the doors opened silently. They stepped inside, where hundreds of people worked quietly at their tasks. Everything was efficient and calm. No raised voices. No arguments. No conflict. But that was 3,000 years ago, David said as they rode the elevator up to Sarah's office. Surely we have evolved beyond those primitive instincts. Sarah looked at him with that same sad smile. Have we? Or have we simply chosen to ignore them? Her office was on the top floor of the building, with windows that looked out over the entire city. From here she could see the schools where human children learned about peace and cooperation, the hospitals where they healed anyone who needed help, regardless of species, the research centers where they worked to make life better for everyone in the galaxy. She also had a view of the spaceport, where the transport ships came and went. And if she looked very carefully, she could see the small hidden structures built into the hills around the city. Most people thought they were part of the landscaping. David sent a message to the Hegemony Dominion. Tell them that Ambassador Chen would be happy to meet with their representatives to discuss the Forerunner artifacts. Invite them to tea aboard Harmony Station. Should I mention anything about security arrangements? Sarah walked to her window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien warships were probably already moving toward human space. She could feel it in her bones, the way a storm watcher can feel rain coming hours before the first clouds appear. No security arrangements will be necessary, she said quietly. If they come in peace, they will be welcomed as friends. If they come for war, she paused, remembering things she had hoped never to remember again. If they come for war, they will learn why humans chose peace in the first place. David left to send the message, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and her memories. Outside her window, the peaceful city went about its daily business, unaware that their 3,000 years of quiet might soon come to an end. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Fist, and watched as 10,000 hegemony warships dropped out of hyperspace around the human homeworld. Each ship bristled with weapons designed to crack planets and boil oceans. The combined firepower of his fleet could turn entire star systems into cosmic dust. The human response was unexpected. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission," reported his communications officer, a tall reptilian creature with scales that shifted color based on emotion. Right now, those scales showed confusion. It appears to be an invitation. Zethkar's 4 eyes narrowed. He had conquered 17 different species in his long military career. Usually when his fleet arrived, there was panic. Desperate messages begging for mercy, offers of immediate surrender. Sometimes there was defiance, which he actually preferred because it made the conquest more interesting. But an invitation? That was new. "Play the message," he commanded. The main screen flickered to life, showing an elderly human female with silver hair and kind eyes. She was sitting in what appeared to be a comfortable chair, with a cup of tea steaming gently in her hands. Behind her, large windows showed a view of space and the blue-green planet below. "Greetings, Commander Zethkar of the Hegemony Dominion," the woman said with a warm smile. "I am Ambassador Sarah Chen of the Terran Peaceful Coalition. I understand you have traveled a great distance to speak with us. Would you care to join me for tea aboard Harmony Station? I find that most disagreements can be resolved over a good cup of tea and honest conversation." The bridge fell silent. Zethkar's military advisors exchanged glances that ranged from confused to annoyed. His weapons officer, a massive creature covered in battle scars, actually laughed. "Commander, they must not understand the situation," said his second-in-command. Perhaps we should demonstrate our power first. A few destroyed outposts might help them think more clearly. Zethkar studied the transmission. The human woman did not look afraid. She did not look confused. She looked sad, as if she was disappointed about something. No, he said finally. We will accept this invitation, but we go prepared for deception. An hour later, Zethkar and his senior staff materialized on the human space station. They wore full battle armor and carried personal weapons, expecting either a trap or a desperate attempt at bribery. What they found was a small, comfortable room with soft lighting and the gentle sound of flowing water. Ambassador Chen was waiting for them, still holding her cup of tea. She had changed into formal robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. Next to her chair was a small table with a tea set and several plates of what appeared to be food. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to chairs that had been arranged in a circle. "I took the liberty of preparing refreshments that should be safe for your various biologies." Zethkar remained standing. His officers spread out around the room, hands near their weapons. "Human, I did not come here to share meals. I came to deliver terms." "Of course," Sarah said gently. "But surely you can deliver terms while seated." Your journey must have been tiring. There was something in her voice that made Zethkar pause. It reminded him of his grandmother, back on his homeworld, who used to scold him for being rude to guests. The memory was so unexpected that he actually found himself sitting down. "Very well. But understand that this is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact." He activated a holographic projector that showed images of the Forerunner artifacts humans had discovered. "These belong to the hegemony now. You will surrender them immediately, along with all research data and technological applications derived from them." Sarah sipped her tea and nodded thoughtfully. "I see, and if we decline? Then your species will be conquered and absorbed into the hegemony. Your peaceful worlds will become military outposts. Your people will serve as workers and soldiers for the greater good of the Alliance." "How many ships did you bring?" Sarah asked conversationally. 10,000 of the finest warships in the galaxy," Zethkar said with pride. "Each one capable of destroying your largest cities. And you believe this gives you the right to make demands of us?" Zethkar leaned forward. "Human, I have studied your species extensively before coming here. In 3,000 years, you have never fought a single war. Your ships are unarmed. Your colonies have no military defenses. You are gardeners and philosophers, not warriors. Against the might of the hegemony, you are insects." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, looking into her tea as if she could see the future reflected in its surface. When she looked up, she was smiling again. But there was something different about it now. Something that made Zethkar's survival instincts suddenly start screaming warnings he didn't understand. "Commander, may I ask you a personal question?" "You may ask. Do you have children?" The question caught him off guard. "Yes, 2 sons. And do you love them?" "Of course I love them. What does this have to do with anything?" Sarah set down her teacup and folded her hands in her lap. "If someone threatened your children, what would you do?" "I would destroy them utterly," Zethkar said without hesitation. "Even if you were a peaceful person by nature." "There is no such thing as a peaceful person when their family is threatened." Sarah nodded slowly. "Exactly. Now, Commander, let me explain something about humans that your intelligence reports may have missed. We are all children here. Every human in every system, from the youngest infant to the oldest elder, we are all someone's child. And we are all each other's family." She stood up gracefully and walked to the window that looked out at the human homeworld below. Zethkar could see cities sparkling like jewels across the continents, connected by streams of light that were transportation networks. Millions of humans going about their daily lives, unaware that 10,000 alien warships hung in space above them. "You see peaceful gardeners and philosophers," Sarah continued, "and you are not wrong. That is what we chose to become. But choosing to be peaceful and being unable to defend yourself are very different things." "Are you threatening us, human?" Zethkar's weapons officer growled, reaching for his sidearm. Sarah turned back to them, and for just a moment, Zethkar saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. It was there and gone so quickly he almost thought he had imagined it. But his officers had seen it too, because they had all taken a step backward without realizing it. "I am not threatening you, Commander. I am trying to save you." She returned to her chair and picked up her tea again. "Let me tell you a story. 3,000 years ago, humans discovered faster-than-light travel. We were excited to explore the galaxy and meet new species. We imagined trade and cultural exchange and friendship. But Zethkar prompted despite himself becoming interested in the story. But the galaxy was a violent place. Every species we met tried to conquer us or enslave us or drive us extinct. So we learned to fight back. And we discovered that we were very, very good at it. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. We were so good at it that within 500 years we had become the most feared species in known space. Other civilizations would surrender entire star systems rather than face human fleets in battle. We had perfected warfare to a science that no one else could match. If that is true, then where are your weapons now? Zethkar demanded. Where are your mighty fleets? Sarah smiled that same sad smile he had seen in the first transmission. We put them away, Commander, because we realized that if we continued on that path, we would eventually destroy everything, including ourselves. So we made a choice. We chose to become gardeners instead of warriors. We chose to build instead of destroy. We chose peace. You chose weakness, Zethkar said dismissively. Did we? Sarah asked softly. Or did we choose something much harder than war? She stood up again and walked to a control panel on the wall. Commander, I am going to show you something that I sincerely hope you never have to see again after today. The lights in the room dimmed, and the windows became transparent displays showing space around the human homeworld. Zethkar could see his fleet, 10,000 warships arranged in perfect battle formation. They looked magnificent and terrible, like metal storms waiting to unleash lightning. Then Sarah pressed a single button. The displays zoomed out, showing a wider view of the star system. What Zethkar saw made his confidence evaporate like morning mist. Hidden in the asteroid belts, disguised as mining stations, camouflaged among the planet's rings, were structures that his sensors had completely missed. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. As he watched, they began to power up. Those are not mining stations, he whispered. No, Sarah said quietly. They are not. Commander Zethkar of the Hegemony Dominion, I am respectfully declining your offer. Your fleet is welcome to leave peacefully, and we will provide you with supplies and safe passage home. But the Forerunner artifacts will remain with humanity. The displays showed his own ships now, but from angles that should have been impossible. Targeting solutions appeared on every hegemony vessel. Weapon locks that his sensors couldn't detect, but that were somehow being shown to him in perfect detail. This is impossible, his second-in-command breathed. Our ships have the best stealth and defense systems in the galaxy. Sarah returned to her chair and picked up her teacup one more time. Commander, you have 72 hours to consider our response. After that, if your fleet has not departed our space, we will be forced to defend ourselves. She took a sip of tea and met his eyes directly. And I really, truly hope it does not come to that. Because we remember what we used to be, and we are trying so very hard not to be that again. Zethkar and his officers were transported back to their ship in stunned silence. As soon as they materialized on the bridge, alarms began blaring. Every sensor system was screaming warnings about massive energy signatures throughout the star system. Targeting locks that appeared and disappeared too quickly to track. Weapons that defied every known principle of physics. Sir, his communications officer said, scales now showing pure terror, I think we may have made a mistake. Zethkar looked at the tactical display showing his 10,000 ships, the finest fleet the galaxy had ever assembled, and realized that somewhere in the peaceful gardens below, something ancient and terrible was waking up. Dr. Marcus Webb had been working in the Terran Historical Archive for 40 years. He was a quiet man who loved old books and ancient records. Most people thought his job was boring, but Marcus found peace in the dusty corridors filled with humanity's memories. Today was different. Today, Marcus was walking through sections of the archive that had been sealed for 3,000 years. His access codes had activated automatically 12 hours ago, along with a message that made his hands shake when he read it. Condition Crimson. Unseal all restricted historical records. Begin emergency broadcast preparation. May God forgive us. The sealed section smelled of old metal and recycled air. Emergency lighting cast long shadows between rows of storage units that contained humanity's darkest secrets. Marcus moved slowly between them, his portable scanner beeping softly as it recorded everything. The first storage unit contained military records from the Dark Expansion period. Marcus had studied references to this era in his regular work, but the details had always been classified. Now, as he opened file after file, he began to understand why. Ship designs that made modern hegemony vessels look like toys. Weapons that could crack planets from the inside out. battle strategies that were so ruthlessly efficient, they had driven dozens of alien species to complete extinction, and casualty reports that made Marcus sit down hard on a storage crate, his legs suddenly weak. In 500 years of expansion, humanity had fought 1,247 major wars and eliminated 89 different alien civilizations. Not conquered, eliminated, wiped from existence so completely that even their homeworlds had been turned into asteroid fields. Sweet Mother of Earth, Marcus whispered. What were we? His scanner beeped, indicating an incoming priority message. Marcus activated his communicator to see Director Chen's face appear in a small hologram. Dr. Webb, how is the unsealing process proceeding? Director, these records... They can't be real. According to this data, humanity killed over 40 billion sentient beings during the Dark Expansion. Sarah's image nodded slowly. Those numbers are accurate, Marcus. Every death is documented. Every world that was destroyed is recorded. We made sure to remember everything so we would never forget why we chose peace. But why are we unsealing these records now? Because the hegemony Dominion has given us 72 hours to surrender, or they will destroy our civilization. Sarah's voice was calm, but Marcus could see the weight of centuries in her eyes. It's time for the galaxy to learn the truth about humanity. Marcus looked around at the thousands of storage units that surrounded him. Each one contained evidence of humanity's violent past. Ship specifications, weapon designs, tactical manuals, personal accounts from soldiers who had committed unthinkable acts in the name of human survival. What do you want me to do with all this? Upload everything to the Galactic Information Network, all of it. Let every species in the galaxy see what humans were capable of when we chose war over peace. After Sarah's image disappeared, Marcus sat in the silence of the archive and thought about the children playing in the gardens above. They had no idea that their species had once been the terror of the galaxy. They knew only peace and kindness and cooperation, but their ancestors had been monsters. Marcus began the upload process, watching as humanity's hidden history flowed into the galactic network. Within hours, every major civilization would know that the peaceful gardeners they had dismissed as harmless had once been the galaxy's apex predators. Meanwhile, across human space, other changes were beginning. On the colony world of New Horizon, farmer Janet Morrison was working in her vegetable garden when the ground began to shake. She looked up to see her neighbors gathering in the streets, pointing at something in the distance. Beyond the rolling hills that surrounded their small town, massive structures were rising from the earth. Janet had lived on New Horizon for 30 years. She thought she knew every hill and valley for hundreds of kilometers, but now she was watching metal spires taller than mountains pushing up through the soil, shedding dirt and grass as they climbed toward the sky. What in the world? She muttered, wiping soil from her hands. Her neighbor, an elderly man named Robert Chen, walked over with a grim expression on his face. Janet, you need to get inside and pack a bag. The evacuation sirens are going to sound soon. Evacuation? Robert, what are those things? Robert looked at the rising structures with eyes that held memories of a different time. Those are fortress complexes, Janet. Automated defense systems that have been sleeping under our feet for 3,000 years. If they're waking up, it means someone has threatened to destroy our way of life. Similar scenes were playing out across hundreds of human worlds. The terraforming stations that had been part of every colony were revealing their true nature. Massive defensive installations that had been disguised as atmospheric processors and weather control systems. The mining operations in asteroid fields were becoming weapon manufacturing plants. The agricultural research facilities were showing themselves to be military command centers. On the space station Gamma 7, Dr. Elena Vasquez was in her laboratory studying plant genetics when her assistant burst through the door. Doctor, you need to see this. The young man was holding a data pad that showed readings Elena had never seen before. What am I looking at, Thomas? Energy signatures from the station's lower levels. Massive power sources are coming online. And Doctor, these readings suggest the entire station is actually one enormous weapons platform. Elena frowned and called up the station schematics on her computer. She had worked on Gamma 7 for 15 years, studying how to create better crops for human colonies. But now, looking at the technical drawings with new understanding, she could see it. Hidden behind false walls and disguised as research equipment were weapon systems that could destroy entire fleets. Thomas, access the restricted personnel files. Search for anyone with a military designation from before the coalition. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, accessing databases she had never known existed. What she found made her sink into her chair with shock. Every senior researcher on the station had another identity. Dr. Peterson from the genetics lab was actually Admiral Peterson, former commander of the 3rd Human Attack Fleet. Dr. Kim from hydroponics was Colonel Kim, veteran of the Altair genocide. And Elena herself, Dr. Vasquez, Thomas said quietly, reading over her shoulder. According to this, you used to be Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Human Deep Strike Corps. It says you commanded the fleet that destroyed the Kythera homeworld. Elena stared at her hands. These hands that had spent decades nurturing plants and developing better food sources. She was beginning to remember other things these hands had done, orders she had given, buttons she had pressed, civilizations she had ended. Thomas, I need you to leave the station. Right now. Take the last civilian transport and get to the nearest non-military world. But Doctor, why? What's happening? Elena stood up slowly, and as she did, 3,000 years of suppressed memories came flooding back. The weight of command, the cold calculation needed to plan genocides, the terrible efficiency with which humanity had once waged war. Because I'm not Dr. Elena Vasquez anymore, she said quietly. And this station isn't a research facility. It's a battleship. All across human space, the same transformation was occurring. Peaceful colonists were remembering that they had once been soldiers. Agricultural scientists were recalling their training in biological warfare. Terraforming engineers were activating the planetary defense networks they had built into every world. The Human Historical Archives data reached the Galactic Network 18 hours after Dr. Webb began uploading. The response was immediate and terrifying. Every major alien government suddenly understood that they had been sharing the galaxy with a species that had once systematically exterminated anyone who opposed them. On the Hegemony flagship, Commander Zethkar watched the historical records with growing horror. Videos of human fleets turning entire solar systems into cosmic graveyards. Technical specifications for weapons that violated every treaty of civilized warfare. Personal accounts from human soldiers describing atrocities that made his species' worst war crimes look like minor disputes. Sir? His communications officer reported, scales now permanently stuck on the color indicating pure terror. We're receiving messages from across hegemony space. Every military commander is asking the same question. How do we fight an enemy that once killed 40 billion people in 500 years? Zethkar didn't answer. He was watching a video record of something called the Vega Incident, where humanity had ended a war by causing an entire star to go supernova, destroying 6 inhabited worlds and 20 billion aliens in a single moment. The human commander who had given that order was listed as Admiral Sarah Chen, 3rd Fleet Command, the same Sarah Chen who had invited him for tea. Sir, what are your orders? Zethkar looked at the tactical display showing his 10,000 ships. Just hours ago, he had been confident of victory. Now he was beginning to understand that his mighty fleet was facing an enemy that had once turned entire galaxies into empty space. Continue monitoring human communications, he said finally. And prepare the fleet for, I'm not sure what, but prepare for the impossible. On the surface of the human homeworld in the crystal gardens where children had played just days before, massive weapon emplacements were rising from beneath the flower beds. The peaceful world was shedding its disguise, revealing the fortress that had always been hidden underneath. Humanity was waking up from its 3,000-year dream of peace, and the galaxy was about to remember why they had been so afraid in the first place. The 72 hours passed like a countdown to the end of the world. Commander Zethkar had spent those hours studying every piece of historical data about humanity that his intelligence officers could find. The more he learned, the less he wanted to proceed with the invasion. But the Hegemony High Command had been clear in their orders. The humans were bluffing and their peaceful nature made them weak. The fleet would attack as planned. Standing on the bridge of the Crushing Fist, Zethkar watched as his 10,000 ships moved into attack formation around the human frontier world of Kepler 442c. This was where the Forerunner artifacts had been discovered. This was where humanity would learn that the galaxy belonged to the strong, not the meek. All ships report ready for bombardment, his weapons officer announced. We can begin planetary bombardment on your command. The human colony below looked exactly like every other human settlement Zethkar had seen in intelligence reports. Peaceful cities with gardens and flowing water, no military installations visible, no planetary defense systems, just 2 million humans going about their daily lives, apparently unaware that death was about to rain down from space. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface," the communications officer reported. On screen, the image that appeared was not what Zethkar expected. Instead of a terrified governor begging for mercy, he saw a middle-aged human woman in simple clothes standing in what appeared to be a flower garden. Behind her, children were playing on swings that hung from the branches of enormous trees. "Greetings, Commander Zethkar," the woman said calmly. "I am Governor Maria Santos of Kepler 442c. I understand you have come to take our world. Governor Santos, you have one final opportunity to surrender unconditionally. Turn over all Forerunner artifacts and submit to Hegemony Authority. You have 5 minutes." The woman looked sad, the same kind of sadness Zethkar had seen in Ambassador Chen's eyes. "Commander, I have lived on this world for 60 years. I helped plant these gardens when I was just a child. I have watched my children and grandchildren grow up playing under these trees. This is our home, and in 5 minutes it will be ash unless you surrender." "No, Commander. In 5 minutes you will learn why humanity chose peace." The transmission ended. Zethkar looked around his bridge at his senior officers. These were veterans of a dozen successful conquests. They had never failed to bring a world to its knees. But now he could see doubt in their eyes. "Sir, orders?" his weapons officer asked. Zethkar thought about his own children, safe on his homeworld millions of light years away. He thought about the historical records showing what humans had done to species that threatened them. He thought about Ambassador Chen's warning about saving them from themselves. "Begin bombardment," he said quietly. The first wave of hegemony ships opened fire on the human colony. Massive energy beams designed to melt cities struck the planetary surface. For a moment, Zethkar thought the attack had succeeded. But then his sensors started screaming warnings that made no sense. "Sir, our weapons are being absorbed." "What do you mean absorbed?" "The energy from our bombardment is not destroying the target. Something is collecting it and redirecting it." On the main screen, Zethkar watched in amazement as the beams from his ships struck what appeared to be invisible barriers above the human cities. The deadly energy was caught, channeled, and fed into collection points that had been invisible until now. "Sir, massive power signatures are appearing all across the planet." What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations. The ground around every human city opened like blooming flowers, revealing weapon emplacements that defied every known law of physics. Energy cannons that drew power from the planet's core, gravity manipulators that could crush ships like tin cans, quantum disruptors that could unmake matter at the atomic level. "Impossible," Zethkar whispered. "Our intelligence reports showed no military installations." His tactical officer was staring at his displays in shock. "Sir, these weapon systems were here all along. They were just hidden. The entire planet is one enormous fortress. The human weapons fired once, not a barrage. Not a sustained assault, just one perfectly coordinated moment of controlled destruction. In the space of 17 minutes, 847 hegemony ships simply ceased to exist, not destroyed in explosions of fire and debris. They were simply there one moment and gone the next, as if they had never been built. The remaining ships in Zethkar's fleet found themselves unable to move. Invisible hands of manipulated gravity held them in place, while scanning beams examined every inch of their hulls. It was not an attack. It was a demonstration. "Commander," came a new voice over the communication system. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Fleet. Please prepare to receive medical assistance for your surviving crews." "Admiral, but our intelligence reports indicated no human military personnel in this system." "Your intelligence reports were wrong about many things, Commander. We are transmitting boarding authorizations to your ships. Our medical teams will treat your wounded and repair your damaged vessels." Zethkar looked at his tactical display. His mighty fleet had been reduced by nearly 10% in less than 20 minutes. The survivors were completely helpless. Any one of the human weapons platforms could have destroyed his remaining ships instantly. Instead, small medical vessels were approaching from the planet's surface. Human doctors and engineers coming to help the people who had just tried to murder their families. "This makes no sense," his weapons officer muttered. "Why are they helping us?" Zethkar was beginning to understand, because that is what humans choose to be now. Over the next few hours, human medical teams worked tirelessly to save hegemony soldiers who had been injured in the brief battle. They shared their advanced medical technology freely, asking nothing in return. They repaired damaged ships with efficiency that amazed the hegemony engineers. And all the while, Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching over the process. She was a small woman with graying hair and kind eyes. She looked like someone's grandmother. But Zethkar had read her historical file. She was responsible for the deaths of 6 billion aliens during the Dark Expansion. Admiral, Zethkar said when she finally agreed to meet with him in person, "Your people could have destroyed my entire fleet." "Why didn't you?" Elena poured him a cup of tea, the same ritual Ambassador Chen had performed days earlier. "Because destroying your fleet would not have solved anything, Commander. It would only have proven that humans are still capable of being monsters. But you are capable of it. The demonstration proved that. Yes, we are capable of it. That is why we choose not to do it." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Tell me, Commander, do you have nightmares?" The question surprised him. "Sometimes. From my military campaigns. I have nightmares every night," Elena said quietly. "Dreams about the worlds I helped destroy. The civilizations I ended. The children who died because of orders I gave. Do you know why I became a botanist after the coalition was founded?" "No." "Because plants grow back. If you tend them carefully and give them time, life returns to places where it was destroyed. I spent 3,000 years trying to grow back what I had killed." She stood and walked to a window that looked down at the human colony. The cities were intact, the gardens untouched. Children were still playing under the trees as if nothing had happened. "We could have rebuilt our empire, Commander. We could have conquered the entire galaxy and ruled it with absolute power. Instead, we chose to plant gardens and raise children and try to become worthy of the mercy we never showed others. But you kept your weapons. All of this technology hidden but ready." Elena nodded sadly. "Because we learned that the galaxy is not always ready for peace. Sometimes you need to be strong enough to defend what you love." She turned back to face him. "Your fleet is repaired and free to leave whenever you choose. We will not pursue you or retaliate against your homeworlds. But we will also not surrender our artifacts or submit to conquest. The hegemony will send more fleets, larger ones, yes, probably, and we will defend ourselves if necessary." Elena's voice was calm but firm. "But we hope it will not come to that. We hope that eventually the galaxy will learn what we learned. That true strength comes from choosing peace when you have the power to choose war." As Zethkar prepared to leave the human ship, Elena gave him a small gift. It was a seed pod from one of the trees in the colony's gardens. "Plant this on your homeworld," she said. "Water it carefully and give it time to grow. When you look at the tree, it becomes, remember that peace is not the absence of power. Peace is what you do with power when you have it." The surviving hegemony ships departed Kepler 442c in silence. As they jumped to hyperspace, Zethkar looked back one last time at the human world. From a distance, it looked exactly as it had when they arrived. A peaceful colony with gardens and flowing water. But now he knew the truth. Every garden was built on top of a fortress. Every peaceful world was protected by weapons that could crack planets. And every smiling human diplomat was a former warrior who had chosen to put down their sword. The galaxy would never look the same to him again. In his private quarters, Zethkar planted Elena's seed in a small pot of soil from his homeworld. As he watered it carefully, he wondered what kind of galaxy they might build if other species learned to make the same choice humans had made. The choice to be strong enough to choose peace. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442c, the galaxy had become a very different place. Dr. Sarah Okafor finished checking the vital signs of her latest patient and made notes on her medical pad. The patient was a hegemony warrior who had been critically injured in the brief conflict. His species normally healed slowly, but human medical technology had accelerated his recovery by months. "How am I doing, doctor?" the alien asked in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "You're healing perfectly, Sergeant Krell," Sarah said with a smile. "You should be able to return to duty within a week." "Return to duty?" Krell looked confused. "But I am a prisoner of war." Sarah sat down in the chair next to his medical bed. "You're not a prisoner, Sergeant. You're a patient. When you're healthy, you're free to go wherever you choose." This conversation was happening all across human medical facilities throughout the galaxy. Thousands of hegemony soldiers who had expected execution or slavery found themselves receiving the best medical care available. Human doctors worked around the clock to heal the warriors who had come to destroy their worlds. The political effects were enormous. Within weeks of the battle, 3 hegemony member species had withdrawn from the alliance. The Zentari Republic declared that they would not participate in wars against species capable of such mercy. The Corvan Empire announced that they were seeking direct diplomatic relations with humanity. Even within the remaining hegemony worlds, public opinion was shifting. Commander Zethkar, now demoted to captain for the failure of his mission, stood in his small apartment on the military station orbiting his homeworld. On his windowsill, Elena's seed had grown into a small tree with silver leaves that caught the light from the nearby star. The tree was beautiful in a way that reminded him of human gardens. His personal communicator chimed with an incoming message. The holographic image that appeared was familiar but unexpected. Captain Zethkar, Ambassador Sarah Chen said with her characteristic gentle smile. "I hope you are well, Ambassador. I did not expect to hear from you again. I wanted to extend an invitation. Humanity is establishing something called the Institute for Peaceful Resolution. We would like you to consider joining our first class of students." Zethkar looked at his small tree. In the 6 months since the battle, he had thought often about what he had witnessed. The terrible power that humanity possessed and their choice to use it only for defense. The mercy they showed to enemies who had tried to commit genocide against them. What would I study at this institute? How to transform conflict into cooperation. How to build peace between species with different needs and different fears. How to choose the harder path when violence seems easier. And you think I am qualified for such study? Sarah's smile became sadder but warmer. Captain, you have seen what happens when civilizations choose conquest over coexistence. You have also seen what happens when those with power choose mercy over revenge. These experiences make you exactly the kind of person we need. 3 weeks later, Zethkar found himself on the human world of New Geneva. Walking through the crystal gardens he had once planned to turn into radioactive ash. Now he was one of 50 beings from 20 different species, all attending the first session of humanity's new school for peace. The institute was housed in a building that exemplified human design philosophy. Flowing curves instead of sharp angles, natural light and growing plants integrated into every room. Spaces designed to calm the mind and encourage thoughtful conversation rather than heated argument. Dr. Elena Vasquez, former admiral and destroyer of worlds, now served as the Institute's director of conflict resolution. On the first day of classes, she stood before the assembled students and spoke quietly about the nature of power. Many of you come from species that believe strength means the ability to impose your will on others, she said. Today I want to introduce you to a different definition. True strength is the ability to choose restraint when you have the power to destroy. The curriculum was unlike anything Zethkar had encountered in his military education. Instead of studying tactics and weapons, they learned about psychology and diplomacy. Instead of analyzing ways to break enemy morale, they explored methods for building trust between former enemies. One of his classmates was a young Corvan named Thesia, whose species had recently withdrawn from the hegemony. During a discussion about territorial disputes, she expressed frustration with the human approach. But what if the other side refuses to negotiate? She demanded. What if they only understand force? Elena nodded thoughtfully. That is always a possibility, Thesia. Can you give me an example of when you think force would be necessary? If someone was about to kill your children, surely even humans would fight to protect their families. Absolutely, Elena agreed. Humans will always defend innocent lives. But there is a difference between defense and aggression, between protecting what you love and destroying what you fear. She activated a holographic display that showed the human homeworld. 3,000 years ago, we believed that the only way to protect our families was to eliminate anyone who might threaten them. We killed entire species because we were afraid they might attack us. Someday, the image changed. To show the peaceful cities and gardens that now covered the planet, we learned that true security doesn't come from destroying your enemies. It comes from having the strength to defend yourself while working to turn enemies into friends. As the months passed, the Institute's influence spread throughout the galaxy. Students returned to their homeworlds with new ideas about resolving conflicts. Trade agreements replaced military alliances. Diplomatic missions replaced invasion fleets, but not everyone was happy with these changes. The core hegemony species, led by the militaristic Kreth Empire, saw the Institute as a threat to their way of life. They began planning a massive military response to what they called human contamination of galactic culture. Ambassador Chen received the intelligence reports in her office overlooking the Crystal Gardens. The Kreth were assembling the largest fleet in galactic history. Over 50,000 ships equipped with weapons designed specifically to overcome human defenses. They're calling it the Final Solution Fleet, her intelligence director reported. Their stated goal is the complete extinction of humanity and all species that have adopted human philosophy. Sarah looked out at the gardens where children from dozens of species now played together. Human children laughing with young Corvin and Zentari and even a few hegemony offspring whose parents had defected. How long until they arrive? 6 months, possibly less. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the choice her species now faced. They could return to their old ways, unleash the terrible weapons they had developed during the Dark Expansion, turn the approaching fleet into cosmic dust before it reached human space, or they could try something that had never been attempted in galactic history. Send a message to every species in the galaxy, she said finally. Tell them that humanity is calling for volunteers. Volunteers for what, Ambassador? To show the universe what peace looks like when it fights back. The response surprised even Sarah. Within weeks, ships began arriving from across the galaxy. Not military vessels, but converted civilian craft carrying volunteers from hundreds of different species, teachers and doctors and engineers and farmers, all willing to stand with humanity against the approaching storm. They came because they had seen what human mercy looked like. They came because they wanted to live in a galaxy where strength was measured by the ability to choose peace. They came because they believed that something worth building was also worth defending. Captain Zethkar was among the first to volunteer, bringing his small personal ship to join the growing fleet. As he docked at the human space station that served as the Volunteer Coordination Center, he was met by Dr. Elena Vasquez. "Captain, you don't have to do this," she said. "This isn't your fight." Zethkar looked around at the bustling station where beings from dozens of species worked together to prepare their defense. In the observation lounge, he could see the small tree he had grown from Elena's seed, now transplanted into a place of honor. "Doctor, 6 months ago I came here to destroy everything you had built. Now I've seen children from my homeworld playing in your gardens. I've watched my people learn to solve conflicts with words instead of weapons." He paused, thinking about the choice that defined this moment. If that's not worth defending, then nothing is. The Final Solution Fleet arrived 3 weeks later, expecting to find scattered human colonies defended only by the peaceful gardeners they had always dismissed as weak. Instead, they found something unprecedented in galactic history. A defense fleet composed of volunteers from over 200 different species, all united by a shared belief that peace was worth fighting for. Ships designed not to destroy but to protect, weapons that disabled rather than killed, a military force that fought to preserve life rather than take it. The battle lasted only hours. The Kreth fleet, despite its overwhelming numerical superiority, found itself outmatched by defenders who fought not from hatred, but from love. When their ships were disabled, they received medical assistance. When they surrendered, they were treated with dignity. And when the fighting ended, they were offered the same choice that every species in the galaxy now faced: continue the old ways of conquest and domination, or learn to build something better. 5 years later, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the same crystal gardens where she had walked as a young woman, but now the gardens stretched across dozens of worlds, tended by beings from hundreds of different species. The Institute for Peaceful Resolution had become a galactic university. The Volunteer Defense Force had evolved into a peacekeeping organization that resolved conflicts before they became wars. Children from across the galaxy played together under trees grown from seeds shared between worlds. Former enemies worked side by side on projects that benefited everyone. The old cycles of conquest and revenge had been replaced by something humanity had spent 3,000 years learning to build. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now in her 90s, walked slowly through the gardens with her newest student, a young Kreth who had been born on one of the ships in the Final Solution Fleet. "Teacher," the young alien asked, "my parents still don't understand why humanity didn't destroy our fleet when you had the chance." Elena smiled and touched one of the silver trees that now grew throughout the gardens. "Tell them a story, young one. Tell them that once there was a species so powerful, they could have owned the entire galaxy, but instead of taking it, they chose to share it. Instead of ruling it, they chose to tend it like a garden. She looked up at the stars visible through the dome overhead, each one now surrounded by worlds where different species lived in peace. Tell them that true power isn't the ability to destroy everything you touch. True power is the ability to help everything you touch become more than it was before. Across the galaxy, in gardens tended by beings who had once been enemies, children played together while their parents worked to build a future none of them could have imagined alone. And on thousands of worlds, small trees grew from shared seeds, their silver leaves catching starlight like promises of what could be accomplished when the strong choose to be gentle. Humanity had made their choice, and in making it, they had helped an entire galaxy choose as well.